Hello, my lads. All right, we are almost there. So we're on the second to last day. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So I'd like to invite you all. Like I said, we just got one more day of class. Jump in whenever you like, when you feel free. And let's go ahead and give you guys. We're going to start off with a quick background on what had just happened. So, as everybody knows, we are currently with Captain Nemo in a submarine. Going under, I think right now they're in the North Pacific. And yo, what's up, Franco? Good to see you. 2 more days. Oh, well, actually, like today and then tomorrow. This is the last time. I'm gonna miss you guys. I know I was barely seeing you guys, but like this was about it. I can't do that. I don't have Twitch. I don't have Steam. But yeah, if you have any other suggestions for the last day, please let me know. I'm already gonna be doing something for Mr. Fredo Figueroa later on. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're currently the submarine had just come across a shipwreck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So like there's some people that got caught up in the ropes, and they were actually drowned together with the ship. There's probably more people that drowned that weren't pulled down with the ship. But right now we see a couple that were pulled down, tied by just the ropes of the sailing ship. Because remember, this was the late 1800s. Even though there are steam-powered ships at this point, like they were not the most common. Most people were actually still sailing in the old school type ships. So just mast and sail. I see we got 3 people. Freddie, I was just talking about you. So I just told them about our proposition for the last day of school. So thank you so much. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. This dreadful sight ushered in a whole series of maritime catastrophes that the Nautilus would encounter in its run. After it entered more heavily traveled seas, we often saw wrecked hulls rotting in mid-water. At greater depths, cannons, shells, anchors, chains, and 1,000 other iron objects being eaten up by rust. Meanwhile, continually carried along by the Nautilus, where we were near in isolation, we had raised the Tatumo Islands on December 11th, and that old dangerous group associated with the French global navigator Commander Bougainville. It reaches the Duchy Islands to the Lazaref Islands in the distance of 12,000 miles east-southeast and west-northwest. This group of islands covers a surface area of 23,000 square miles and is made up of 60 subgroups, among which are the noted Gambier group, which is a French protectorate. These are coral islands. Their slow but continual upheaval will someday connect them with each other, thanks to the efforts of the polyps. Later, this new island will be fused together with its neighboring island groups, a 5th continent that will stretch from New Zealand to New Caledonia all the way to the Marquesas Isles. So, all of this, remember, is based on real science. Hi, Diana, good to see you. So this is based off of real science that at the time was not very well known. So it was impressive for a writer at the time to be on the cutting edge of like zoology and oceanography and all that sort of thing, because most people, it wasn't as common knowledge back then that islands could actually be made from coral. So the day I explained this theory to Captain Nemo, he answered me coldly. The Earth does not need new continents. It needs new men. Sailor's luck led the Nautilus straight to the Rayo Islands, one of the most unusual in this group, which was discovered in 1822 by Captain Bell aboard the Minerva, so I could study the madreporic processes that had produced the island into the ocean. Madrepores, which you must guard against confusing with the precious coral, clothe their tissue in the limestone crust. Their variations and structure may lead to my famous mentor, Professor Milne Edwards, to classify them into 5 different divisions. The microscopic animals that secrete polypary live by the billions of the depths of the ocean cells. Their limestone deposits became rocks, reefs, inlets, and islands. Excuse me. Some places they form atolls, a circular ring surrounding a lagoon, or a smaller inner lake that puts a gap in contact with the sea. Elsewhere, they shape barrier reefs, like those along the coast of New Caledonia, several of the Tutamao Islands. Still in other localities, such as the Reunion Island and the Mauritius, they build fringing reefs, high, straight walls next to the ocean that descend into considerable depths. Freddie, what were you going to say? Go ahead and put it back on. While cruising about a quarter mile from the underpinnings of the Rio Islands, I marveled at the gigantic piece of work accomplished by the microscopic laborers. These walls were the express achievements of the madrepores, going by the names of fire coral, finger coral, star coral, and cauliflower coral. These polyps grew exclusively in the agitated strata at the surface of the sea. Uh, so it's the upper reaches, they start to support the structures, which gradually sink along. Tomorrow, Freddie, tomorrow. And don't forget to send me the link tomorrow, so have it ready for me. Um, Upper reaches, they support these support structures, which gradually sink along the secreted rubble binding them. At least that's the theory of Mr. Charles Darwin, who explains the formation of atolls in this manner. A theory superior, in my view, to the one that says that these madreporic edifices sit on volcanoes or mountain peaks submerged a few feet below sea level. Okay, cool. Sounds good. I could study these strange walls quite closely, since our sounding lines show that they drop straight down more than 1,000 feet, and our electric beams made the bright limestone positively sparkle. In answer to the question Conseil asked me about the growth rate of these colossal barricades, I thoroughly amazed him by saying that the scientists put it at an eighth of an inch for every 200 years. Therefore, he said unto me, in order to build these walls, it took 192,000 years, my gallant Conseil, which significantly stretches out those days of creation in the Bible. Besides, the formation of coral, in other words, the petrifying coasts of forests swallowed up by floods, and the cooling of basaltic rock both call for a longer period of time. I might add that these days the Bible must stand for whole eras and is not just the time between two sunrises, because according to the Bible itself, the sun doesn't date from the first day of creation. So keep in mind, this is not controversial at the time. For some reason, it became controversial later on. The whole idea that the Earth is more than 9,000 years old, something like that. So for the record, it definitely is older than 9,000 years. When the Nautilus came back to the surface of the ocean, I could take in the Rio Island with a whole flat, wooded expanse. Obviously, its madreporic rocks had been fertilized by tornadoes and thunderstorms. One day, carried off by a hurricane from neighboring shores, some seed fell into the limestone bed, mixing with those decomposed particles of fish and marine plants to form vegetable humus. Propelled by the waves, a coconut arrived at the new coast. Its germ took root. The tree grew tall, catching steam off the water. A brook was born. Gradually, vegetation spread. Tiny animals, worms, insects, rode ashore on tree trunks in the winds uprooted from other islands. Turtles came to lay their eggs. Birds nested in the young trees. In this way, animal life developed. Drawn by the greenery and fertile soil, man appeared. That's how these islands were formed, the immense achievement of microscopic organisms. Towards the evening, Real Island melted into the distance, and the Nautilus changed course in a noticeable fashion. After reaching the Tropic of Capricorn at longitude 135, it headed northwest-northwest, back into the intertropical zone. Though the summer rays lavished upon us, we never suffered from the heat because 100 to 130 feet underwater, the temperature stayed at a range between 50 degrees and 55 degrees Fahrenheit. By December 15th, we've all left the alluring society in the east. Likewise, gracious Tahiti, Queen of the Pacific. In the morning, I spotted the island's lofty mountain peaks a few miles leeward. The waters furnished excellent food for our ship's tables. Mackerel, bonito, albacore, which is a type of tuna, and some variety of sea serpent known as the moray eel. The Nautilus had traveled 81,000 miles. We logged 9,720 miles as we went among the Tonga Isles, where crews from the Argo, Port-au-Prince, and the Duke of Portland had perished, and the island group of Samoa, the slaying of Captain Delange, friend of that long-lost navigator, Count de la Parousse. We traveled to the Fiji Islands, where savages, I'm going to say natives, slaughtered sailors from the Union, as well as Captain Burrow, commander of the Sweet Josephine out of Nantes, France. Stretching over the distance of 250 miles south and 225 miles east to west, this island lies between. It consists of various islets, reefs, among which are Viti Velu, Vanu Lekubu, and Kaduba. It was the Dutch navigator Tasman who discovered this group of islands in 1643, the same year that Italian physicist Torricelli invented the barometer and Louis XIV ascended to the French throne. I'll let the reader decide which of these deeds was most helpful to humanity. Later came Captain Cook in 1744, Rear Admiral de de Castro in 1793. Sorry, I don't speak French. And finally, Captain Dumont d'Urville, who untangled the whole chaotic geography of the island. The Nautilus grew near the Wailea Bay, an unlikely place for England's Captain Dillon, who was the first to shed light on the long-standing mystery surrounding the disappearance of the Count de Perrosset. Dredged several times, this bay furnished a huge supply of excellent oysters. As the Roman playwright Seneca recommended, we opened them right at the table and ate way too many. These mollusks belong to a species known as the Ostrea lamellosa, whose members are quite common off Corsica. This Wailea oyster bed must have been substantial. If these clusters of shellfish hadn't been so natural enemies, they surely would have ended up jam-packing the bay, since close to 2 million eggs have been counted in a single individual. For the record, oysters are super delicious, and I highly recommend them, especially if you can get them raw with a little bit of lime and horseradish sauce and hot sauces. If Mr. Ned Land didn't repent of his gluttony this time around, it's because the oysters are the only dish that never causes indigestion. In fact, it takes at least 16 dozen of these mollusks from the class Acephala to supply the 315 grams that satisfy one minimum day supply of nitrogen. On December 25th, the Nautilus navigated in the midst of the island group, which the New Hebrides, which the Portuguese seafarer Queiroz discovered in 1606, which Commander Bougainville explored in 1768 and got the current name from Captain Cook in 1773. This group consists chiefly of 9 big islands that form a 300-mile strip from the north-northwest to the south-southeast, lying between latitude 2 degrees and 15 degrees south, and between longitude 164 and 168. The moment of our noon sights, we passed fairly close to the island of Aro, which looks like a mass of green woods with a very high mountain peak towering over them. Yes, it is, Diana. I'm gonna miss you guys. I hadn't seen Captain Nemo for over a week. On the morning of the 27th, he entered the main lounge, as usual, acting as if he'd just been gone for 5 minutes. I was busy working on the Nautilus's course on the world map. The captain came up, put a finger on the spot on the chart, and said just one word: Vanikoro. This name was magic. It was the name of the islets where vessels under the Count de Perrosset had miscarried. I straightened instantly. You know I don't have favorites, but, if anyone asks, you 5 are my favorite. Yes, Professor. And I can visit those famous islands where the compass and the astrolabe came to grief, if you like, Professor. When will we reach Vanikoro? We already have, Professor. Followed by Captain Nemo, I climbed onto the platform, where my eyes eagerly scanned the horizon. In the north-northeast, there emerged 2 different-sized volcanic islands that were encircled by a coral reef 40 miles around. We were facing the island of Vanikoro proper, which Captain Dumont d'Urville named the Island of Search. We lay right in front of the little harbor of Vanna, located at latitude 16 degrees south and longitude 164 east. Its shores seemed to be covered up with greenery from its beaches to its inland peaks, where Mount Capago, towering over them, was 2,856 feet high. After taking the narrow passageway through the outer belt of rocks, the Nautilus lay inside the breakers, where the sea's ocean depths ranged from 180 to 240 feet. Under the green shade of mangroves, I spotted a few savages who looked tremendously startled at our coming. As this long, blackish object moved forward and flushed the water, didn't they see it as some fearsome cetacean that they'd better treat with respect? Just then, Captain Nemo asked me what I knew about the shipwreck of the Count de la Perrosset. What everybody knows, Captain, I answered him. Would you kindly tell me what everyone knows? He asked me with a touch of sarcasm in his tone. Very easily. I described to him about the last efforts of Captain Dumont d'Urville that had been brought to light, efforts detailed in the heavily condensed version of the whole business. In 1785, King Louis XVI of France sent Count de Perrosset and his subordinate Count de Lange on a voyage to circumnavigate the globe, go all the way around. They boarded 2 sloops of war, the Compass and the Astrolabe, and they were never seen again. In 1791, justly concerned about the fate of those 2 sloops of war, the French government fitted out 2 large cargo boats, the Search and the Hope, which left the which left Brest on September 28th under the command of Rear Admiral Bruni Descontreux. 2 months later, the testimony from a certain Commander Bowen aboard the Albemarle alleged that the rubble of the shipwrecked vessels must have been seen off the coast of New Georgia. But Descontreux hadn't heard the news, which wasn't too reliable in any case, and he headed to the Admiralty Islands, which had been named in a report by one Captain Hunter as the site of Count Le Parais's shipwreck. He searched in vain. The Hope and the Search traveled right past Vanikoro without stopping there. And in short, this voyage was plagued by misfortune, ultimately costing the lives of Rear Admiral de Control, two of his subordinate officers, and several seamen of his crew. It was an old hand at the Pacific, and the English adventurer, Captain Peter Dillon, who was the first to pick up the actual trail left by the castaways of the wrecked vessels. On May 15, 1824, his ship, the St. Patrick, went to the Tikopoa Islands on the New Hebrides. There, a local boatman pulled aside a dugout canoe and sold Dillon a silver sword hilt, which bore the imprint of characters engraved with a burin, a type of cutting tool. What's more, the boatman claimed that during his stay in Vanikoro 6 years earlier, he'd seen two Europeans belonging to the ships that had run aground in the island's reef long ago. Dillon guessed that the ships in question were those of the Count de la Périssé, ships which the disappearance had stirred the whole world. He tried to reach Vanikoro, where the old boatman had told him a good deal of the rubble of the shipwreck could still be found, but winds and currents kept him from doing so. Dillon went back to Calcutta. There he was able to interest the Asiatic Society of the East India Trading Company to his discovery. They put a ship named after the Search at his disposal, and he left on January 23, 1827, along with a French deputy. This second search made several Pacific stops, then dropped anchor in front of Vanikoro at July 7, 1827, the same harbor of Vanna where the Nautilus was currently floating. There, Dillon collected many relics of the shipwrecks, including iron utensils, anchors, eyelets from pulleys, swivel guns, an 18-pound shell, and the remains of some astronomical instruments. Pieces of stern rail, bronze bell bearing the inscription made by Bazin, the foundry maker at Brest Arsenal around 1785. There could be no further doubt. Dillon finished his investigations, staying at the site of the casualty until the month of October. Then he left Vanikoro, headed to New Zealand, and anchored off of Calcutta on April 7, 1828. Then went back to France and received a very cordial letter from King Charles X. By that point, the renowned French explorer Captain Dumont d'Urville, unaware of Dillon's activities, had already set sail to search elsewhere for the site of the shipwreck. In essence, a whaling vessel had reported some medals and a cross of St. Louis had been seen in possession of some savages outside the Louisade Islands of New Caledonia. So Captain Dumont d'Urville had put to sea in command of a ship named after the astrolabe, and within 2 months, Dillon's departure at Vanikoro, Dumont d'Urville dropped anchor in the front of Hobart. There he heard about Dillon's finding, and he also heard that a certain James Hobbs, chief officer of the Union cut off of Calcutta, had put ashore in a local island that was 18 degrees south and longitude 156 east. And he noted that the natives of the waterways were using iron bars and red fabrics. Pretty perplexed, Dumont d'Urville didn't know if he should give any credence to these reports, which had been carried by less than dependable newspapers. Nevertheless, he decided to start on Dillon's trail. On February 10, 1828, the second astrolabe pulled up in front of Tikopoa Island and took a guide and interpreter in the person of a deserter who had settled there, plied a course for Vanikoro, raised it on February 12th, and sailed along the reefs until the 14th. On the 23rd, several officers circled the island and brought back the rubble of little consequence. The natives had adapted a system of denial and evasion, refusing to guide the Frenchmen to the site of the casualty. This rather shady behavior aroused the suspicion of the natives that had mistreated the castaways, and in fact the natives seemed afraid that Dumont d'Urville had come to avenge Count Le Parcé and his unfortunate companions. But on the 26th, persuaded by presents and seeing that they didn't need to fear any retaliatory measures, the natives led the chief officer, Mr. Jacquinot, to the site of the shipwreck. At any location in 20 to 25 feet of water between Pio and Vanna reefs, lay anchor, cannons, and ingots of iron, all lead with caked limestone concentrations. And they launched a whale boat from the second astrolabe and were steered towards this locality. And after going to exhausting lengths, the crews managed to dredge up the anchor wearing 1,800 pounds, a cast iron 8-pounder cannon, a lead ingot, and two brass swivel guns. Questioning the natives, Captain Dumont d'Urville learned that after Le Perousse's ships had miscarried on the island's reefs, the Count had built a smaller craft only to go and miscarry a second time. Where? Nobody knew. Afterward, Dumont d'Urville tried to set sail, but his crews were run down from the fevers raging in those unsanitary shores. Since he was quite ill himself, he couldn't weigh anchor until March 17th. Meanwhile, afraid that Dumont d'Urville wasn't up to date with Dillon's activities, the French government sent a sloop of war to Vanikoro, the daughter of Bayonne, which was stationed at the American west coast under Commander Legourant de Tromelin. Dropping anchor in front of Vanikoro a few months after the second astrolabe had left, the daughter of Bayonne didn't find any additional evidence, but verified that the savages hadn't disturbed the memorial, honoring Count de Le Percé. This was the gist of what I told Captain Nemo. So, he said to me, the castaways built a third ship on Vanikoro Island, and to this day no one knows where it went and who perished. Nobody knows. Captain Nemo didn't reply, but he motioned for me to follow him to the main lounge. The Nautilus sank a few yards under the waves, and the panels opened. I rushed to the window and saw crusts of coral, including fungus coral, lichen coral, leather coral, and cup coral, under this coral covering, beneath myriads of delightful fish such as rat, tilapia, sweepers, snappers, and squirrelfish. I detected some rubble and the old dredges that hadn't managed to tear loose. Iron stirrups, anchors, cannons, shells, tackle from the capstan, the stem post, all objects falling from the wretched ships that now were carpeted in moving flowers. As I looked at this desolate wreckage, Captain Nemo told me in a solemn voice. Captain Le Perrosset set sail on December 7th, 1785, with his ships, the Compass and the Astrolabe. He dropped anchor first in Batney Bay, visited the Tonga Islands, New Caledonia, then headed to the Santa Cruz Islands, and put into Numuka, one of the islands of the Ha'awapi group. Then his ships arrived at the reefs of Vanikoro. Traveling in the lead, the Compass slammed into the rocks off the southerly coast. The Astrolabe went to its rescue and also ran aground. The first ship went to pieces also immediately. The other, stranded leeward, held up for a few days. The natives gave the castaways a fair enough welcome. The latter took up residence on the island to build smaller crafts with the rubble off of the two full-size ones. A few seamen stayed willingly on Vanikoro. Others, weak and ailing, set sail with the Count Le Percé. They headed for the Solomon Islands, and they perished with all hands on the westerly coast of the chief island of that group, between Cape Deception and Cape Satisfaction. How do you know these things? I exclaimed. Here's what I found at the very site of the final shipwreck. Captain Nemo showed me a tin box, stamped with the coat of arms of France and all but corroded by salt water. He opened it, saw a bundle of papers, yellowed but still readable. They were the actual military orders given to Commander Le Perrosset by France's Minister of the Navy, with notes along the margin with the handwriting of King Louis XVI. Ah, what a splendid way for a seaman to die, Nemo said. A coral grave is a tranquil grave, and may heaven grant him the companions that my companions and I lie in no other. Thank you guys for coming by. Tomorrow, Torres Strait, the final chapter that we're going to get to. Definitely not the final chapter of the book, but thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you for the last day of class.